My name is Alice, and at 28 years old, I find myself navigating the intricacies of married life. Just 2 years after our wedding, a consistent stream of commentary from my in-laws has become a regular part of my days. Adjusting to my husband's frugal nature while living with his spendthrift in-laws has proven to be quite a challenge. A striking dichotomy exists between my husband's financial habits and his parents' extravagant lifestyle. I, on the other hand, continue to work at the construction company founded by my grandfather, an institution that has shaped my values of modesty and frugality since childhood. The absence of my mother, who passed away during my fourth grade year, was filled with the unwavering support of my grandfather and father. Their kindness helped me cope with the loss and shape my dedication to contributing to our household, raised with a strong foundation of values. I dedicated myself to various chores and even started saving money, which earned me praise from my grandfather despite its small size. The construction company feels like a close-knit family where everyone genuinely cares for each other. However, my grandfather's passing before I graduated high school marked another significant transition. I immediately began working with my father in our family's construction firm to provide support for entering the workforce and continuing to uphold my grandfather's values. I joined a company where I was warmly welcomed despite my position as the boss's daughter. It was around this time that I met my husband, Brian, who also worked in construction. Our shared penchant for saving money brought us closer together, and over time, our bond deepened into a romantic relationship in the face of personal tragedy. My father's passing due to illness brought comfort and solace in Brian's presence, which led to our eventual marriage. This empowerment enabled me to stand my ground against manipulation and deceit from my husband, who was pursuing an affair and planning to remarry. Ultimately, I emerged from these trials stronger and more resilient. The journey led me to rediscover my identity, nurture my professional ambitions, and prioritize my own well-being. As my ex-husband's life spiraled into chaos, I found stability and support among my colleagues and within the company. With the resilience of the human spirit and the transformative power of adversity, could you possibly lend us some money? Catherine, my in-laws, approached me with their request and an appeal that I couldn't easily dismiss their spending habits that had led them to a financial shortfall this month. And they assured me that they would promptly repay me once their payday arrived. As this pattern repeated itself more frequently, I found it difficult to outright refuse their pleas, so I extended a helping hand initially in modest amounts. But over time, the borrowed amounts grew and repayment began to encounter delays. The principles of familial cooperation weighed on me, driving me to continue supporting them amidst these financial exchanges. I turned to my husband for guidance and understanding. Seeking his input, I presented the situation, and his reaction was one of sympathy and concern. "I'm sorry for the trouble I'll put in more overtime, and together we'll navigate this challenge." His words were reassuring, and he expressed his desire to prioritize planning for our future as well. I was pleasantly surprised by his sudden openness to thinking about the years ahead, including aspirations for children and a home of our own separate from our parents. However, the journey towards these goals wasn't as straightforward as it seemed. Gradually, my husband revealed that his parents were teetering on the edge of bankruptcy, a revelation that took me by surprise. The news brought with it the revelation that he had already depleted his savings to address their debts, yet the crisis persisted. He then turned to me, requesting that I consider using the inheritance from my late father to resolve their financial troubles. This proposition deeply conflicted with my values and convictions, and I was not inclined to divert the funds my father had left for our shared future into settling my in-laws' debts. Their past mistreatment of me based on my relatively humble background only intensified my reluctance. Furthermore, the notion of consuming my carefully accumulated savings from before our marriage felt counterintuitive. The prospect of giving them my savings and making use of the money left by my father was profoundly unsettling. "Why should I comply with your plans?" I mustered the strength to respond, my voice firm and determined. If he believed I would silently submit to his whims, he was gravely mistaken. You think I'll quietly accept whatever you dictate? If that's what you believe, then you truly don't understand who I am. His complacency and arrogance astounded me. Did he genuinely expect me to acquiesce to his plan to willingly shoulder the burden of caring for his parents after everything he had done? The more I considered his audacity, the more resistant I became. You've been of good help. That's what you think being a wife is about? Well, your notion of my role ends today. As the truth emerged, I realized the extent of his manipulation. His confident smile masked his true intentions, and my in-law's endorsement of his plans betrayed a shared disregard for my well-being. Within me, fueled by a newfound determination not to let them trample on my dignity, the absurdity of my husband's claims became evident as he continued speaking. My father has already quit his job and squandered his retirement funds. He declared as if this information were meant to justify their demands. Their financial recklessness was beyond comprehension, and her attempt to lay the responsibility at my feet incensed me further with each passing moment. My resolve grew. I was no longer the naive and passive woman they assumed me to be. I refused to live with such madness. I declared, addressing Brian directly, that I wouldn't subject myself to your manipulation any longer. I watched his expression shift from smugness to bewilderment. My words defied his expectations, challenging his illusion of control as he struggled to comprehend my defiance. I could feel a growing sense of empowerment. Within me, the reality was clear. I deserved better. I deserved respect, autonomy, and the opportunity to rebuild my life on my terms. With this newfound strength, I declared my intention to take control of my destiny and stand up against their oppressive expectations. You know what's truly unfortunate? I met his gaze. My voice steadied. It's unfortunate that you underestimated me, but mark my words, Brian, your manipulative game ends here, so that means you'll have to rely even more on welfare. I countered with a mixture of disbelief and frustration. Brian's attempt to downplay the gravity of the situation struck me as ludicrous. It was as though he believed that the IOU's existence was merely a formality devoid of any real obligation. Wait a minute, whether it's just a formality or not, the IOU is still a binding agreement. I clarified. My voice was laced with exasperation. His lack of comprehension regarding financial responsibility was evident, and I felt compelled to spell it out for him. Furthermore, the absence of a set repayment date doesn't mean you're off the hook. It simply means the lender can demand repayment at any time. Brian's countenance shifted abruptly with the realization dawning upon him that his assumption had been faulty. His surprise mirrored my disbelief at his misguided perspective given his professional background in a major company with his plans faltering. He attempted to salvage his position by asserting his control. Well, I'll make my parents file for bankruptcy, and then that would free them from the obligation to repay, he threatened, his tone dripping with defiance. My response, however, took him by surprise. Once again, fine, then go ahead, I retorted, refusing to back down. It was clear he hadn't fully grasped the ramifications of his actions, but keep in mind that filing for bankruptcy won't absolve you of your responsibility. You'll still be obligated to pay. His frustration with my persistence was palpable as he shouted back, "They're all only thinking about themselves." In this heated exchange, it became apparent that our values and priorities were vastly different. A renewed sense of purpose and empowerment informed my decision to end my ties with this dysfunctional family. Solidified regret was absent from my heart, and leaving them was the right choice. Submitting the divorce papers at my parents' vacant house felt like a turning point. I frequently suggested selling the property, but something had always held me back. Now I was glad I had clung to it. Untouched by his influence, I engaged a lawyer and initiated a process to hold Brian and his family accountable for their debts. Brian's frantic call only reaffirmed his lack of understanding of the legal consequences of his actions as I informed him of his obligations. His demeanor oscillated between disbelief and frustration. His desperation led him to a baffling proposal. "How about we get back together? If we're married, all our debts will be cleared." I was momentarily speechless. Brian's proposal was utterly illogical, and without reason, I questioned how I had ever envisioned a future with someone like him. His lack of comprehension was staggering, but his audacious request was surpassed by his next response. "You're still trying to milk me for money. You're so greedy." My reply was unwavering. "Say whatever you want. I won't be defeated by your words." I directed my lawyer to handle any future communication with his family through this ordeal. I pursued property division and compensation from Brian and his lover, who had been present before our divorce. With each step, I reaffirmed my determination not to be manipulated any longer. As the legal proceedings progressed, I realized that my empowerment had an unintended consequence. Brian's financial situation rapidly deteriorated. The house he had bought to repay the debts was sold, and his lover spent recklessly exploiting his credit card. Brian's downfall culminated in his arrest for stalking his ex-lover and losing his job. He found himself in a spiral of debt and despair. Ultimately, filing for bankruptcy was a poetic turn of events given his initial resistance to taking responsibility. In stark contrast, my life began to stabilize. I lived in a renovated house, supported by colleagues who valued my contributions with renewed vigor. I worked diligently while continuing to save money. My journey through this tumultuous chapter had taught me lessons of resilience and self-empowerment. As the dust settled, I looked forward to a future marked by independence, growth, and a refusal to be swayed by manipulation or deceit. The possibility of causing discomfort to my parents-in-law was a concern that haunted me, yet my husband suggested a compromise to frame the financial assistance as a loan. Even though I had my doubts about the practicality of such an arrangement, seeking reassurance about the potential for repayment, I questioned the feasibility of this plan. My husband proposed using his father's upcoming retirement bonus as a repayment, securing the agreement by promising to facilitate this process. In the process, he hinted at a shared desire to leave our current living arrangement and build a life of our own, eager to secure a future with my husband. I relinquished my savings to pay off his parents' debt. Their expressions of gratitude, previously unheard of, held a bittersweet satisfaction for me, with a signed agreement in place. I held on to the hope that their promises of repayment would eventually come to fruition. However, the unfolding events took an unexpected turn. Just a month later, my husband's demeanor shifted dramatically. All of a sudden, he attributed his family's financial rescue to my efforts. Their avoidance of bankruptcy, he stated, was due to my intervention. Amidst expressions of gratitude, he revealed his own secret. He had used his savings to build a house supplemented by a loan. His confession came as a shock, as I had believed that he had used his savings to address his parents' debts. In this revelation, my husband's deception and manipulation became painfully evident. I was confronted with the reality that his initial gratitude had concealed a self-serving agenda. What had begun as a united effort to secure our future together had taken an unforeseen and disheartening turn. The realization that my contributions had been exploited for his personal gain left me speechless and disillusioned. To add to the turmoil, my husband disclosed his intention to remarry his lover and move into the new house, leaving me to care for his parents. This stunning revelation shattered any remaining illusions about our relationships. The abrupt announcement of his ongoing infidelity and his plans for a new life caught me off guard, leaving my mind reeling as I grappled with the ramifications of his bombshell. A rush of emotions surged within me. Confusement, disbelief, and anger intermingled as I confronted the depth of his betrayal. Amidst my shock, I struggled to comprehend how he could so callously discard our marriage, all the while attempting to justify his actions. In a moment that crystallized the painful truth, I found myself questioning whether any of our shared experiences and dreams had truly held meaning for him. The future we had envisaged, built on mutual support and trust, lay shattered as the reality of his intentions sank in. I realized that the journey ahead would be one of redefining my identity, reclaiming my agency, and healing from the devastation of betrayal. "So you've been engaged in an affair all this time?" I confronted my husband with a crushing revelation. My words were a mix of disbelief and hurt, but his response was far from remorseful. "That's not a fair way to put it. I'm planning to marry her." "Seriously, it's a legitimate relationship, but you're married to me," I protested, searching for some semblance of rationality in his statement. His casual attitude toward the gravity of his actions baffled me. "Well, that's all in the past now," he replied nonchalantly, seemingly unperturbed by the fact that he was still married to me. "You mean you're getting a divorce? Otherwise, how can you remarry?" The reality of his intent to divorce me hit me, accompanied by a wave of confusion and shock. But wait, my mind struggled to process the situation. His words unveiled a stark reality, one that seemed far removed from the husband. "I thought I knew you're getting a divorce from me exactly. But don't worry. You can continue living here, get along with my parents for a while longer, and you can be the one paying the rent." He continued his tone, masking the gravity of his decisions as he spoke. It became evident that the man standing before me was no longer the husband I once recognized. His demeanor, his words, and his intentions all painted a picture of a stranger. Amidst this disorienting conversation, my in-laws chimed in, endorsing his plans, further cementing my sense of alienation. "We're counting on you, Catherine." They said their expectations were clear. After all, his new girlfriend is only 20 years old. Living with someone so young can be frustrating, so we'd prefer you to stay here. The weight of their collective disregard for my feelings and rights as a spouse left me speechless. They seemed to have known about my husband's affair, and their nonchalant acceptance of the situation compounded my sense of betrayal. The realization that my husband and his family were prepared to reduce me to a mere caretaker, a person to manage their needs and household chores, was both shocking and infuriating. The support I had extended and the trust I had placed all seemed to be disregarded with indifference. In this moment, it became painfully clear that the sacrifices I had made, including my hard-earned savings, were manipulated for their benefit. After Brian left the room, I remained in a state of shock, struggling to reconcile the events unfolding before me. The divorce papers he had handed me were a stark reminder of his intentions. His signature was a testament to the irrevocable change in our relationship. The weight of my emotions ranged from emptiness and disbelief to anger and self-reproach. I berated myself for being blindsided by his scheme and for failing to see the truth beneath his facade. Gradually, however, a shift occurred within me. The numbness gave way to a simmering anger and a newfound resolve. I recognized that I cannot allow myself to be treated with such cruelty and injustice. Brian's smug satisfaction contrasted with the fury I felt building within me. Since that day, I have been planning to destroy them completely.